Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing, the podcast where we bring you the things that you may not know that you require for healing, or things that you may have known but have forgotten. We bring a holistic perspective, addressing both physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic causes behind disease. So today's episode is it's one of the organ energetics ones. It is about the kidney organ function energy. So it is about our kidney health in general, as well as energetically what our kidneys affect. Now, I mean, kidneys are really important, right? Lots of people actually eventually succumb from renal failure. They start with other diseases, and ultimately the fatal thing is the kidneys actually starts shutting down and we have a renal failure. So these are very important organs. We know that we have two of them and that we can actually survive with only one. But once I've been through today what the kidney does energetically for us, you will understand the importance of these organs and have a new appreciation for your kidney organ function energy. So the kidney and the bladder are coupled organ functions, and they are part of the water element in the Chinese and the Japanese traditional healing systems. And the water element is associated very much with our emotions. Now, the emotion of the bladder and kidney organ function energy is fear, but it's fear with capital letters. It is the deep-seated unconscious survival fears that we have, right? Those unconscious fears that make us that are linked to what we truly believe we need to do in order to avoid rejection and to avoid death, literally. So as we age, that kidney organ function energy becomes more and more activated because, we have sometimes less life left than what we've already lived. I had my 55th birthday the other day, a month ago, and I thought to myself, oh, I wonder what the next 20 years of my life are going to look like. And I was like, well, in 20 years' time, I'll be 75. It's like, well, if I'm lucky, I'll probably have like another 10 years on top of that, and hopefully those will be good quality years. But 35 even doesn't sound like a lot of time when you've already lived 55. And that's a typical kidney organ function energy kind of thought to have about like, oh, time is running out. So it's those unconscious survival fears, but also our conscious survival fears. So our worry that the worries that we have about money, the worries that we have about aging, about getting sick, the worries that we have about how it is that we're going to be able to take care of ourselves or take care of our loved ones, anything that's around our security, our material security, or actually even our physical safety and security. So if we live in a place where we feel unsafe, that affects our kidney organ function energy for sure. So in Chinese medicine, the kidney is the warehouse of the essence, or the reservoir of all our life energy. So in Oriental medicine, it's believed that we're born with a certain amount of life essence. It's called Jing in Chinese medicine, and that this is stored in our kidneys and that we deplete this as we age. And our kidney health is therefore vital to whether we age well or not. So preserving your kidney function and looking after your kidney function and making sure that your kidney organ function energy is working optimally is one of the best things that you can do for longevity, and not just for longevity, but actually aging well. So one thing that's worth knowing is that the kidney organ function energy starts in your little toe and it moves across the sole of your foot to the inside of your ankle and then up through the inside of the leg. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because a lot of problems that happen underneath the foot, plantar fasciitis, those kind of things, can be related to an imbalance in this kidney organ function energy. It moves up along the inner thigh. It sends a branch through the reproductive organs. So it moves through the testicles, it moves through the ovaries, it moves through the uterus. And it sends a branch into the lungs and the heart, actually, and then it sends a part of it goes into the head and directly into the brain. So our kidney health is, and especially the energetic health of the kidney, determines our mental health, our mental flexibility. So when the kidney organ function energy becomes depleted, then we can become rigid. We become sclerosed. So we have hardening of not only physical structures in our bodies, we become stiffer, we become less flexible, but we also become less flexible in our thinking. We can become more hardened in our beliefs. we become more, more rigid all around, actually. And that increase in rigidity can be seen sometimes in our losing of our mental faculties as we age. And so the kidney organ function energy is related to dementia, amongst other things. So it's important to note, one doesn't often think of your physical kidney organ function energy as having an effect on your brain, but it absolutely does. So, yeah, that was the important part about the thing to the brain. The energy of the kidney is I create. So the heart organ function energy is I radiate, and the kidney organ function energy is I create. Our kidney organ function energy is the source of our creative power. It also it regulates the muscles, and not just the striated muscle, in other words, the muscles that we have in our musculoskeletal system, but also the smooth muscle, the muscle that's under involuntary control, the muscles of our gut, for example, right, that enable that peristaltic activity of the gut, the muscles in the blood vessels that cause the blood vessels to narrow, to contract, and to expand. Those are also governed and controlled by the kidney function. And your kidney organ function energy affects how well your bones develop and the development of your teeth and your hair and your nails, as well as the overall health of those organs. So very important things that we would almost never think of. I mean, when we think of kidneys, we think of, I don't know, renal failure. I think of like diabetic complications. Very often the kidney becomes involved, or kidney stones, or maybe occasionally kidney infections, but those aren't as common as other infections, for example. But it has a profound effect on the musculoskeletal system. In Oriental medicine, all the sense organs have an internal organ that they couple to, and the kidney is the internal organ of the ear, particularly the inner part of the ear. So that hearing apparatus, the part that controls our balance, is affected by the kidney organ function energy. So many types of vertigo can be affected by a weakness or an imbalance in that kidney organ function energy. The kidney organ function energy also regulates the health of the hormones. It regulates the health of the adrenal glands, which are those little glands that sit on top of the kidneys, which help us to regulate our stress. Our adrenal glands are very often linked to how purposeful we feel our lives are. And the kidney, the emotion is fear, right? And so fear very often interferes with our purpose, with our ability to take action in the world in the direction of what we love, right? To engage fully with life. I mean, I truly believe that our purpose is to engage with life in every dimension possible. It's not so much about what we're doing in the world, but it's how much are we engaging. And the thing that stops us from engaging in relationships, taking risks, in moving into new areas of life, expanding into the unknown, is fear. Because fear is a contracting kind of emotion, and fear is the emotion associated with the kidney organ function energy. So this is why it's also vital. The healthier your kidney organ function energy is, the more you are going to be able to regulate your fear. The more fear you have, the more negatively it affects your kidney organ function energy. So your kidneys also regulate your hormone function, and your kidneys are most active. That kidney energy is most active during puberty, during pregnancy, and during menopause. Now, if you think about it, puberty is a transition from childhood into adulthood. Well, not really. Well, I don't know if we could say adulthood, but essentially from being a child in order to being a reproductively viable human being, right? And there's a lot of change that happens during puberty. I mean, our entire brains get rewired in puberty. So there's a lot of change and transformation, and the unknown and uncertainty that happens in puberty, which is one of the reasons why puberty can be such a trying time for both those going through puberty and those parenting those going through puberty. Pregnancy is another such time where, I mean, it's a beautiful, joyful occasion, but, you know, things can go wrong during pregnancy, or we don't know how it's going to go, or we don't know how our baby's going to turn out, or we don't know when it's actually going to be born. And yes, we've got all this wonderful technology these days that can do millions of tests, but we still have a relatively little agency about it. And it's the unknown. What kind of mother am I going to be? What kind of father am I going to be? What are our lives going to be like when this new being enters our world? So it is a time of transition. And the next time of transition is menopause, of course, when we go from being fertile to losing that fertility and having that energy that we've been expending outwards into growing our family, or, you know, growing people, or growing our relationships. That energy is now available for us to actually do it inwards. And that can be a very difficult transition for people. So once again, the health of your kidney organ function energy can determine how easily, smoothly or whatever the opposite of that is, like stickily, not smoothly, we move through those periods of our lives. And when we can support those organ function energies during those periods of our lives, it helps those transitions to happen more smoothly. So the kidney is really very impactful because it is the organ that is most active during these massive life transitions, these phases. What else can I tell you? Oh, the kidney organ function energy is helps to nourish the uterus, to keep the uterus nourished while during pregnancy. The bladder organ function energy is also really pivotal in that. And in Chinese medicine, if the baby is breech, then you do something called moxibustion on the side of the little toe, which is where the kidney organ function energy starts and the bladder organ function energy ends. And it's a system of heating a point. In Jinshinjutsu, you hold the little toes if the baby is breech, because if you reduce the fear in the body, and it affects the organ energy flow as it moves up the legs and into those reproductive organs, and very often it stimulates the baby to turn so that we don't end up having a breech birth. I said to you, I don't know if I said this, but in traditional Chinese medicine, the kidney houses the essence, yes, the life essence, or the jing. Now, it's also associated with the water element, as I mentioned. So a couple of episodes ago, I spoke about the heart organ function energy, and we said that the heart organ function energy houses the shen. And the shen is essentially the light of the spirit. And so the heart is the radiant organ. The kidney is the creative organ, and the heart is associated with the fire element. So we've got the fire element and the water element. And so we've got this spirit in the heart. We've got the life essence in the kidney. We've got the joy and the radiance of the heart. And when that emotion, when the heart is imbalanced, we get the trying to and the hustling and the comparing and the competing and the struggle. And when the kidney organ function energy is imbalanced, then we get the fear, which is all very contractive. Whereas when the kidney organ function energy is balanced, then we become creative. We step into our creativity. We allow our spirit to move through us and to create what we love in the world. And we express our spirit through our heart. The shen gets expressed. And physiologically, they say in Chinese medicine that the biggest tussle is between these polarities, between the water and the fire element. So either if the fire is out of control, it burns up the water, and we end up having kidney problems, or if the water's out of control, it drowns the fire. And so that can be things like renal failure or heart failure even, that can be pressure from the kidney organ function energy on the heart organ function energy. And so we end up with all this fluid accumulation when we have heart failure. So very important that, I'm talking about the organs in isolation, but remember, nothing functions in isolation. They're all depending on one another and having an effect on one another. So in the Hindu system, in the Sanskrit system, the Indian system of energetics, we have the 7 chakras, right? And so the kidney is classified as being part of either the root or the sacral, or both, depending on which tradition you're looking at. So our root chakra, it helps to ground us. It helps to ground us in our reality. It helps to ground us within our family of origin. It helps us to fit in with our tribe. It helps us to identify with our tribe. It's got that sort of tribal survival energy. And it's about how, the stronger your root chakra energy is, the more grounded you are, the more earth you are, and the easier it becomes for you to create in the world. The root chakra, as I said, it's associated with grounding. It's associated with survival. It's associated with our security. So you can hear, right? Very much with the kidney. And it also is associated with our creativity, whereas the sacral chakra is associated with the water element. It's associated with our emotions. It's associated with flow, and it's associated with creativity. And so when the kidney organ function energy, when that sacral chakra actually and the kidney organ function energy are imbalanced, then we can have issues around power in relationships, one-on-one relationships with people. That's the emotional aspect of it. We can, and it's about control. We try and assert control within relationships, or we feel out of control in a relationship, can also imbalance that energy. It's got to do with sex, as in reproduction, physical creativity, reproduction. It's got to do with our ethics. What are we prepared to do in order to get our physical needs met, in order to get our security and safety needs met. And it's associated with, did I say money? Money, because money is associated with our physical survival in the world. So when our kidney energy is balanced, then we feel safe, and we feel courageous, and we feel we can go with the flow. We can direct the flow of life because we can use that creative energy to do that. And when it's depleted, we become fearful. We can be exhausted. We can have insecurity. Our creativity is blocked. We can develop physically, back pain can be associated with that fear and insecurity, especially lower back pain. We can have premature aging, as I said, because when we deplete that kidney function, that kidney essence, the more we deplete the essence, that's the life force that we're born with. And the more carefully we manage that, well, the slower we age. And the less carefully we manage it, we can have premature aging, we can have burnout, and we can have feelings of deep fear, and actually even hopelessness that goes with it. So the energy or the organ function energy that's associated with the kidney organ function energy is the bladder. And I mention this because we often also think of the bladder in terms of, it's like bladder infections, bladder stones, not that common in humans, actually quite common in dogs and cats, mostly in cats, actually, if I remember correctly. And maybe bladder cancer, which is one of the more rare forms of cancer. But the bladder organ function energy is really important, because whereas the kidney organ function energy starts in the little toe and moves up into the head, the bladder starts here. And it sends a branch into the head, and it's got triple branches. One heads in this direction and two go this way, and it moves down the back. And so our bladder organ function energy is very important in regulating all our mental and emotional conditions. Now, again, that's not something we would think about, right? I mean, I didn't think about this until I'd learned this. But our stuck thoughts, when things aren't flowing, we think of bladder and kidney organ function energy, right? So the bladder organ function energy regulates all our mental and emotional conditions. It's a balancing energy, and it specifically clears the head. So it clears it from things like repetitive thoughts, incessant thoughts, stuck thoughts, continuously harping on something, obsessing about it. When you did this thing to me, all right, that's a very and it's like 20 years ago, and we harp on about it, and we can't get it out of our minds. That is very often associated with the bladder organ function energy. Grudges, things like, I will never forget when you blah, 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 blah. Or sometimes even excessive nostalgia, spending lots of time in the past. And it's quite interesting, because in dementia, most people lose their short-term memory, but their long-term memory is quite good. So they can spend lots of time in the past, but they can't spend any time in the near past. And they find it very difficult to actually be fully present in the present, right? So that's interesting, because that can be also an indication of a depletion or an imbalance in this bladder and kidney organ function energy. So I've mentioned the kidney versus the heart, how those two are diametrically opposed. And so in an ideal world, we would have this jing, this essence, our life essence. We would manage our life essence so that we could be creative, so that we can create what we love. We can align with what it is that we would love, not what it is that we think we have to do in order to survive. And when we do that, we allow our radiance to shine through, which is from the heart, and we can experience true joy. And that's when the light of the spirit actually shines through and radiates out through our hearts. So when we have kidney disease, so when we have things like kidney infections or kidney stones, that's very often associated with deep-seated anger and resentment. Now, anger and resentment is not the emotion of the kidney, but anger and resentment is the emotion of the liver organ function energy. And when that liver organ function energy is not working optimally, it places pressure on the kidney organ function energy, which then depletes that life essence. And so when we are continuously frustrated, when we feel as if we've been hard done by, when we have long-term anger and resentment towards something or someone, then what ends up happening is that it affects our liver organ function energy for sure, but it has a knock-on effect on our kidney organ function energy. And that's what actually starts showing that shows up as an imbalance, which very often then ends up in physical symptoms. So kidney stones is when we've got extreme anger and resentment, because we feel like we've been controlled. We're not in control of our lives. We're resentful because of being controlled or manipulated in certain relationships. So please, just a caveat here. I'm speaking as if these things are absolute. They're not. Not everyone with a kidney stone has a deep-seated resentment towards a partner or in a relationship or a business or something like that, okay? These are themes. These are themes that we can use to start unraveling the thread and then finding out what is actually specific to you, because there is no one size fits all in healing. And especially in these episodes, you can get the idea that, oh, well, if I have a heart problem, that is because I have no joy, or, my kidneys must be compromising me. And yes, you may well be correct. That may be an element of that. But everybody's disease pattern is unique to them. Everybody's disease cause is unique to them. The themes, they are general themes like we're discussing here, but it's not like painting by numbers. You can't say that because a person has X, there must be this Y causation. It's never really that clear cut. Human beings are more complex and complicated than that. So when we have got these physiologically kidney problems, it's usually a deep-seated anger and resentment. It comes from our beliefs. It comes from us not feeling as if we're supported, or feeling as if we've been excessively controlled. And that excessive control then actually depletes our life essence and ultimately can affect our kidney function negatively. I want to just talk about cystitis, because cystitis, bladder infections, is actually quite common, right? And bladder infections, the psychosomatic causes behind a bladder infection is very often around guilt about expressing emotional needs. Now, guilt is internalized anger. And the reason why that happens with cystitis is because very often people who have recurrent cystitis, now I'm not talking about like just a once-off, and maybe a once-off, there will be some sort of correlation here, but when you have been brought up in a way that your goals weren't supported as a child, and you felt like you always had to stand back in order to accelerate other people's goals, where everything's got to be hard, everything's got to be a struggle, for you it's always difficult, for other people it's easy, that kind of mindset, that kind of resentment, right? And an inability to express the truth of your emotions, because if you express that, it would make you a bad person, or it might seem as if you're jealous, or as if you're begrudging other people their success. It's not that. It's the emotional, it's about not being able to express our emotional needs, because we've learned that the emotional needs of others matter more than ours. And this is very, very common. And you know what? This is especially common with women. So women are taught that we are there to cater to the emotional needs of others, and that the emotional needs of others are more important than ours. And I'm not saying men don't have this. And men generally don't have as much cystitis. And one of the reasons why they say they don't is because the urethra is much longer. I don't know if I buy that. But certainly it's about putting the emotional needs of others before yours. And if you think about this, when we have children, we very often do that. And you might say, yes, well, I have to do that. Well, you know what? You don't have to put the emotional needs of the child above yours. You can acknowledge that you have emotional needs, and you can still care deeply for your children. But yeah, so that guilt at not actually expressing our emotional needs, not having our emotional needs met. So we don't articulate those emotional needs because we think they're not going to be met anyway, because everyone else's needs matter more than ours. And so what happens is we feel as if we have to hold ourselves back. We feel as if we've got to be the supportive role, and the other person gets to shine, and we're doing all the hard work in the background, and we're never catching any of the shine or the praise. That very often can lead to cystitis, one bout or more than one bout. So I think that's really, sorry, the last thing I wanted to tell was, because that concludes my thing. So if you feel that you want to nourish your organ function, your kidney organ function energy, and your bladder organ function energy, and you want to harmonize your fear, your index finger is the finger on which the bladder and kidney organ function energy are represented. If you hold the finger by just wrapping the fingers of one hand around your index finger, you can hold your right index finger or your left index finger, it doesn't matter, whichever one feels better for you. If you can do this for 20 minutes a day, and you can do it consistently, it's going to take consistency. I have to just tell you, if you can do 20 minutes a day and you can do it consistently, and particularly when you are feeling fearful, when you are feeling overwhelmed by your obligations and your responsibilities, when your bills are driving you around the twist and you're worried about how it is that you're going to pay them, then holding your index finger really works. I had once, I always used to think holding the fingers was like, that was like It was like Jinshin Jitsu for sissies, because there's much more complicated Jinshin Jitsu that you can do. And I remember my mom was really sick. In fact, she'd had a stroke and she was dying. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I was engulfed by terror, because it was really terror. I felt so responsible, not for her having had a stroke, but I felt responsible for either her recovery or her non-recovery or whatever was going on, her care at the time. And I had such fear, and it was completely irrational. I mean, it wasn't rational. Like, I couldn't rationalize it in my mind. And it was the middle of the night. I didn't want to wake up my husband and I didn't want to create a drama. So I just lay there and I held my index finger, and thinking, oh, yeah, well. And I held my index finger and I just focused on my breathing while holding my index finger, and just allowed myself to just actually accept that I actually was terrified. And I didn't really know why, and it didn't really make much sense. And within 5-10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, the fear, it's like I just felt it dissipating. Now, this won't happen all the time necessarily, but it is actually possible. And so the more you actually do it, the more Jinshin Jitsu you do on yourself, the more you hold your fingers with intention, the quicker your physiology and your energy responds when you really need it. So I can highly recommend holding that index finger, because harmonizing the fear, the fear stops us from living. Fear keeps us trapped. It stops us from being honest about our emotions. It stops us from communicating clearly. It stops us from articulating our needs. It stops us from connecting to what it is that we would love. Like, what is our spirit longing to express to us? It stops us from having adventure. It stops us from having fun. And it stops us from connecting to our hearts so that we can love ourselves and others deeply. So really, holding your index finger is a really easy hack. And why don't you try it? In Jinshin Jitsu, in the self-help section, Mary Burmeister, who brought Jinshin Jitsu to the West, she says, be your own testimony. Just hold the Jinshin Jitsu hold. Do it enough, and you can become your own testimony. Interestingly enough, the index finger is also the one that you give skeptics to hold if they think it's a whole lot of bollocks. So hold your index finger if that's what you think after listening to this episode. If you know of anyone who has problems with their kidney organ function energy, who's struggling with menopause, for example, who is struggling with fertility issues, who's struggling with writer's block and their creativity, for example, maybe you would like to share this episode with them so that they can also get in touch with how important it is to nourish and harmonize that kidney organ function energy. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful, please will you share the link directly with your friends, and they might find it useful also. Until next time, bye.